So again, welcome to today's monthly Zoom meeting of Take Action San Diego. My name is Wendy Galernter. I'm one of the leaders of this group. I have a co-host today, as always, Help Desk Larry, who's here to help anyone with any questions or technical difficulties they run into. Just a brief background, Take Action San Diego's been around since 2020, and we are a chapter of both Indivisible and Swing Left. This is one of our monthly meetings. We meet usually the fourth Saturday of every month, and we almost always meet on Zoom. But coming up in the fall, we will have an in-person meeting as we get our Get Out the Vote effort going. But today's a Zoom meeting, and thanks for being here. And we have a lot to cover, really three separate but related topics. One is the question of letters and postcards to voters and how we can improve on those systems. Second is just a quick electoral update and how the recent election results are informing our midterm strategy. And third are some updates on detention center activism. And then, as always, we wrap up with some recommended upcoming actions and events. So the first thing I want to do, the first topic, is improving on letters and postcards to voters. And I'm guessing many people here have written postcards and letters to voters in the past. But we're going to launch a quick poll, and hopefully everyone can see it. Just two very quick yes and no questions. Have you written letters or postcards to voters in the past? And two, are you interested in doing it again for the midterm elections? And I'll leave this up for just another second as people are filling that out, and then I will share those results. So far, it's looking like about 86% of you have done this before, letters and postcards, and about the same number are interested in doing it again. And I think we got most of the responses now. So there's the results. Thank you, everybody who responded. And about as I expected, it's been a popular form of get out the vote for quite a while. So let's talk a little bit about more about what we know. Really, before Trump was elected, the idea of handwritten postcards and letters to voters was not a widely used tactic. But starting in 2017, people like us began doing this, and organizations like Vote Forward, Activate America. I'm sorry, what is it? Sorry.
The poll's still showing.
Oh, poll is still showing. Not on my thing. Hold on 1 second, folks. Sorry about.
I closed it. You did.
Okay.
I closed it.
Okay. Larry closed it. Okay, we're back. Anyway, starting in 2017, this was sort of a novel approach to getting out the vote. And as I mentioned, Vote Forward, Activate America, Indivisible, many organizations kind of hopped on this new way of communicating with voters. Our group primarily wrote letters using a Vote Forward, but as I said, there were many others. But Vote Forward was one of the few organizations that consistently did replicated controlled trials to test out their messaging, the timing, the types of elections they did, and then always shared the data with the public. And I'm going to talk a lot about their data today. But just for people who aren't familiar with Vote Forward, they're now aligned very closely with Swing Left. Over the last 8, 9 years, there have been about 285,000 volunteers writing letters with them, over 40 million letters written, and 29 replicated controlled trials. And I'm going to show you the data on some of them. But Larry's going to put a link in the chat on a recent article in the Atlantic magazine where Vote Forward is profiled as being one of the few organizations that shares this type of data publicly, which I think is a very good and useful thing. So in the early years, when we were first doing this kind of thing, Vote Forward letters had a pretty significant impact on voter turnout. In 2017, in an Alabama Senate race, people who got the letters were 3.4% more likely to turn out and vote than those that didn't. There was a Virginia general election and also a Maine Senate race. And these are, not humongous percentage numbers, but when you think about the millions and millions of letters that Vote Forward and then other organizations sent out, a 3.4% increase in voter turnout actually ends up being humongous. And I'll show you why in the next slide. So first of all, small numbers of votes can have outsized impacts, right? There's a lot of recent elections, and you're probably familiar with a lot of them, where the Democrat won by a very slim margin. Adam Gray in the California House is probably the most notable one because he won by fewer than 200 votes. But there are other really critical House and Senate races, governor races, where the margins that Democrats won by were very slim. And if we take a kind of middle ground percentage impact from this slide I showed you a second ago, I think we had a high of 3.4% impact, a low of 1.9% impact with the cards and, with the letters. If we take a kind of an average of those and say, let's assume that the letters had a 2% impact, the number of letters that would have had to have been sent to get 200 votes for Adam Gray is about 10,000. And the numbers, of course, go up from there. But truthfully, again, 500,000, even 1 million letters compared to the numbers that have been written isn't that huge and have incredible results, potentially electing a great governor in Arizona like Katie Hobbs, and down the line. So the letters definitely had an impact. But after 2020, or actually in 2020, when we had COVID hitting, we had a presidential election occurring, and we had a lot more people writing letters and postcards than had ever done it before. And the novelty of someone receiving a handwritten letter or postcard was starting to die down. So you can see that after that time, we really never got higher than a 1% increase in voter turnout from letters in this case. These are all significant results, meaning that these are real and not just noise, statistical noise. But still, when you start getting below 1%, you start saying, is this really worth it? And a few things to point out in this graph. It looks like the greater impact occurred with low propensity voters, in other words, infrequent voters. In the presidential election in 2024, high propensity voters, the letters had zero impact on their turnout. It sort of makes sense. We were all going to vote anyway, and a letter wasn't going to make much of a difference for that. There was some nice impact for overseas voters, but again, is this enough to make it worthwhile? So here's what Vote Forward and a number of other people who look at this are thinking. And by the way, similar trends with postcards. The impact was much higher in 2017 to 2020 than it was after that. But when all that data is combined, and I haven't showed you all of it because I don't want people falling asleep looking at millions of graphs. But the best results were achieved when letters and postcards were a novelty. And that was, up until about the presidential election of 2020. They had the most impact on infrequent voters, people who were unlikely to vote, and maybe that letter gave them a little oomph. And the best results also occurred in smaller races, in other words, mayoral races, city council races, state legislative races, and also low turnout races, where, again, the people don't typically vote, or locations that hadn't been previously focused on, like the overseas voters. The worst results occurred in gigantic elections when millions and millions and millions of people are voting and where a lot of attention is being paid to the election, and a letter or two wasn't going to potentially make a difference. And then the worst results, the results got worse after 2020, when in some of the districts where high level important races were happening, there were people getting 5 letters, 10 letters, 20 postcards and letters, and actually starting to get irritated by the number of letters and postcards they were getting. So what does it mean for us going forward? I think this is still an important technique for a lot of reasons. One, and you all probably know this, it's an easy way for people who haven't been that active to get involved. You can sit around with some friends, you can drink some wine, you don't have to talk to another voter. And this has been used as a recruiting tool to bring more people on. That's incredibly important. But it's also important because it can still work. And especially, again, in local and state races with new audiences, virgin audiences who haven't been exposed to this technique before. And one huge group there are newly registered voters. Also, unique messaging. So the messaging tended in these letters and postcards to be very similar for a long time. Vote for this candidate because, or voting is important because. But some organizations are coming up with more unique types of messaging, and I'll give you an example or two in a second. And then when you're selecting a campaign to work on, pick one where the organization is doing some kind of experimental trials, and they're going to share the data with us so that we can learn from what we're doing and get better and better and better at it. And the 2 organizations I know of that are doing randomized controlled trials, and there may be many more, are Movement Labs and then also Vote Forward, which is now actually part of Swing Left. And I'll just talk about 3 experiments that Vote Forward is doing that you might be interested in participating in. And Larry will put the links in the chat if you want to sign up for them. So it's a pilot study. It's an experiment where half of the population is going to get these letters, the other half isn't, and then the statisticians go to work connecting the dots and figuring out whether there was an increase in voter turnout in November. So here the idea is to write to low-income voters with information about government benefits that they may qualify for, and to also have some information about voting in there. And so it may make people, the idea is, more attentive to the content of the letters and more grateful to the person who's writing the letter. A second initiative, another experiment, they're calling it Down Ballot Election Integrity. And this is one that's really focusing on some low turnout state races, in this case in North Carolina and Nevada, and sort of testing the idea that the impact is going to be higher in some of these under the radar and yet important races. And finally, the third experiment is targeting new voters. So these are the voters who have never received a postcard or a letter. In this case, it's newly registered voters in a battleground state, Pennsylvania. And in addition to urging them to vote, they're also going to get information on how to vote, where to vote, when to vote, what they need to bring with them when they go to vote. The idea being that voting is intimidating to new voters and that this will help them turn out and feel more confident about voting. So again, encourage you to sign up for at least one of these studies, and you will be part of an experiment, and then you'll also be part of getting out the vote. So it's sort of a double benefit. Before I switch to another topic, are there some questions about the information I just mentioned? And you can raise a hand or put something in the chat. Otherwise, we will go on. And let's see if we got anything in the chat. Okay. Good. All right, then I'm going to move on to the second and related topic, which is just a little bit of an electoral update and how that's informing our midterm strategy. So lots of good news the last few months. I mean, just based on what I'm showing you here in this slide, we're seeing that there has been a definite trend towards voters favoring progressive Democrats who have not been endorsed by the party establishment. That was the case with Mamdani being elected mayor in January in New York City, and more recently with the three congressional candidates that he supported and surprisingly won. It's the case with Randy Villegas in California, who beat a moderate Democrat in his race. Graham Plattner, you all probably know about. I don't have to tell you about him. But in Texas, there was a state Senate seat that a guy named Taylor Remitt won. And this is not a Democrat on Democrat race. He beat a Republican in a district that Trump won by 17 points. So these were all, and this isn't all of them, but surprise races, partly just because of who won, and then the nature of their politics, which tended to be progressive. Does this mean that the United States is moving towards socialism? Personally, I wish that were true. I'm not sure that that's what we're seeing. I think probably the larger part of what we're seeing is people just disenchanted with the Democratic Party and looking for other options. And whether that trend, therefore, continues in other races, we will see. But everywhere is different, and I don't think we should expect to see this everywhere we go. And one really good example of that is right here in California, where in our governor's race, the most progressive candidate did not win the Democratic nomination. You all know now that Javier Becerra, a relatively moderate Democrat, won in the state and also in San Diego County. Tom Steyer, who had a very progressive platform, Katie Porter, who had a very progressive platform, especially Katie Porter, did not come close. And Tom Steyer, after spending zillions of dollars on the campaign, wasn't able, I think, to defeat the distaste that people have for the idea of a billionaire using their money to buy an election. And as good as his platform was, many people just couldn't hack voting for a billionaire. So it's not the same everywhere. And certainly in California, it didn't end up being that way. I'm just looking at this and trying to remember if there's something else I want to say about this data. Just one other interesting thing about San Diego is that we had a higher percentage of people voting for the Republican Steve Hilton than in the state of California. That surprised me. And it almost looks like, if you look at some of these numbers, that maybe people who would have voted for Katie Porter or Tom Steyer voted for Steve Hilton instead. It's a little hard to tell. But that was a little bit of a surprise to me. We also have lots of important congressional races coming up all across the country. And four in San Diego, in California, at least four that are critical to Democrats taking back the House in 2026 in the midterms. And one of those congressional districts is right here in San Diego, and that is California 48. And the results of the Democratic primary, or the primary, I should say, for that district gave the vote to Marnie Von Wilpert, a relatively moderate Democrat who's a city council person in San Diego. And then the vote got split all over the place among a bunch of other people, ranging from moderates to people who were quite progressive. When you add up all the votes that went to one Democrat or another, 53.2% of the votes went to a Democrat in that district. And that district, the 48th, is Darrell Iss's district, a very MAGA Republican who has retired. It's a district that has been redistricted and in favor of Democrats. And there looks like there's a very good chance that this is a congressional seat that a Democrat will win in November. But it's not a shoo-in. 45.9% of the voters voted for one Republican or another. So it's going to be incredibly important to focus on this district, to get turnout out in this district, and do whatever we can to flip that seat and take back the House. Talk about turnout for just a second. The turnout numbers in this primary in June were pretty good, 40.8% across the state and 41.9% in San Diego County. Primary elections, when there's not a presidential election taking place in that year, tend to have pretty low turnout. And you can see it's been in the 20s and 30s for the last 15 years here in San Diego. So this is in California, sorry. So this is a pretty good jump, but I think we need to do even better. And for people who were here at last month's meeting, where we talked about the Hungarian elections and some lessons learned from those Hungarian elections, one of the major lessons was that voter turnout in Hungary that ousted the authoritarian Viktor Orban was humongous. It was record-breaking turnout, and the results were so overwhelming that even an authoritarian had to back down and away from claims of fraud. And that's what high turnout first is going to ensure that a Democrat wins, but even, or at least as important, when it's an overwhelming number, the accusations of fraud can't be as credible, I guess. They're never credible, but you know what I mean. This increase in Democratic turnout, by the way, is across the country. It's not just here in San Diego or in California. So there is high voter interest, but it really needs to be more, and that's going to be a focus coming up as well. So what can people be doing? And as we start now into the midterm season, my suggestions are, if you live in San Diego County, focus on Congressional District 48. It's there. We can canvass there. We can make phone calls and tell people we live in San Diego. We can write letters with a San Diego postmark on it. Um, it's going to be an important one and a winnable one. But if you have a district you love, that is another important swing district, of course, feel free to focus on there as well. And then we need to use every tool we've got. Letters and postcards, voter registration, phone banks, canvassing, which is still regarded as the gold standard of getting out the vote, and donations as well. And putting a bunch of links in the chat for opportunities for all of these things. I will say on donations that once the majority of primaries are over in late July or sometime in August, people like me and other organizations, Swing Left, Pod Save America, Simon Rosenberg, are going to be building funds that target a wide range of important, critical elections, whether they're state elections, congressional elections, Senate elections, um, so that you don't have to spend all your money on one candidate and kind of put all your eggs in one basket. The money gets spread among a bunch of candidates, and it's a bunch of candidates selected by people who know a lot about where the money could best be used. So I'll be putting out a fund in the next few weeks like that. You can wait for that. But if you don't want to wait and you're dying to make a contribution, I suggest that you make it directly to a candidate of your choice rather than to a large Democratic organization like the DNC, where the money gets kind of shuffled around and doesn't necessarily have as much of an impact. Any questions about the electoral information? If not, do you see any, Larry? Okay. Okay, just finish up with you know, our recent newsletter focused on detention centers, and I feel like we have to reinforce and talk about this some more. We have a detention center in our backyard. It's Otay Mesa Detention Center. I'm sure most of you know about it. The conditions there are horrible. People are being held for all kinds of reasons and for indeterminate amount of times. It's run by a private prison organization that doesn't allow inspectors in, and actually our county had to sue in order to get inspectors into the location. Um, it's it's the most rending and I think one of the most awful symbols of what the Trump administration is about. It's about cruelty and it's about racism and it's about ignoring the law. And we need to shine a light on the fact that this place is in San Diego, to make people aware of it and to put pressure in all of the various pressure points to hopefully one day close it down, but certainly to at least get the conditions improved there and to get legal assistance to the people inside. Now, these detention centers have been called concentration camps in our backyards, and I will get to you in a second, Becky. And I hesitated on this for a while, but I think it's pretty accurate description at this point of Otay Mesa and the other centers around the country. It's persecuted minorities, imprisoned under terrible conditions, families are being separated, people are being detained for indefinite time periods, held without any formal charges or a trial. And then this whole private prison system is so insidiously evil, where they have an incentive to build more and to basically to make it easier to jail more and more people. Um, are they on the same page as extermination camps in Nazi Germany? No. But I do think that the concentration camp name is is accurate here. And Becky, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes. I got a text yesterday that there are people that are being charged and sentenced to 70 years at they were at a an ICE jail, and because they wore this one person wore black, she texted on an encrypted app. Someone handed out homemade signs, whatever that is, um, that every day just doing this, and so they charged her with they charged her as a terrorist.
Yeah, I think you're
And
talking about these were
Alvarado,
protesters.
right, Alvarado jail in Texas. And so this is the first case like this, and it sets the rules for all future ones, Texas thinks. And so anyway, this was put out by the Women's March.
Mm,
And so, in Texas is just so ridiculous. And they're warning people, hey, if we can do it, then this could go. So, I can't see California doing anything like this, but on the other hand, this is just getting totally out of hand, every which way. First they do stuff in Minnesota, now they gave her 70 years. And so, and their idea is if they can give almost life sentences like this to people, people will stop doing this. So,
yeah, no, it's definitely meant to scare us.
yeah.
There's no doubt about that. And I guess, the idea of a private prison system that is getting bigger and bigger and bigger every day, with warehouses being bought, although there's some hope that that's going to peter out. But the attempt is definitely to increase the number of these detention facilities all around the country. And, the question is, who are they going to fill it with? And it's once they start coming for people, I guess, we should all be very worried, and we should be doing what we can to shut them down, which is what I want to talk about next. And because we have this detention facility here, um, there's some very specific things we can do, but anybody in California can email their state senator in support of a bill called Assembly Bill 2465. And this bill withholds government money from private prison companies like Core Civic and Geo Group, who in the past have had the ability and apparently have done it to apply for various grants and loans offered by the government. So this is saying no. And it's passed through the assembly, I believe, and now it's going on to the state senate. There's a good chance that it will pass. And does it shut down every one of these centers? No, it doesn't. There's a lot of sand in the gears type actions that it's going to take probably to get this done. And this is just one piece of sand in the gears to make it less profitable for these companies to continue doing what they're doing. Here in San Diego, though, I know several of you have been to the Otay Mesa Vigil every Sunday afternoon. This has been going on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And we talked about it before in this meeting, but just very briefly, it's not really a protest. It is a way for us who support the people inside to let the people inside know that we're out there And there is a fundraising aspect to it where funds are raised to put on the detainees' accounts so that they have the ability to call their families and let them know where they are, or they have the ability to go to the commissary and buy some water that isn't tainted and polluted. So it's a moving, incredible event to go to. I highly recommend it. Just a few weeks ago, over 1,000 people came out on June 14th to be there. Sometimes it's 75 people, and it really doesn't matter. What matters is that the people inside know that we are out there. So I highly recommend going to that. It's unique. It was covered on NPR recently by Ira Glass, for those who listen to NPR, and putting a link in the chat to get you so you can listen to the audio from that report. It was pretty moving. We also want you to call your San Diego County supervisor and demand an end to the county supporting ICE training at a county-owned shooting range. This just came to light recently, and there's no reason that our county should be cooperating in any way with ICE. And then finally, and this is a bit far afield, but we were contacted by indivisible groups in Maryland who are trying to stop one of these ICE warehouses from going online. And, these are generally warehouses that had other uses. They're vacant. And under Kristi Noem, the Department of Homeland Security bought up a bunch of them and started transforming them into detention centers. There's been a lot of public pushback to it. A lot of them, they had to retread and stop doing it. But this one in Maryland needs the help of people writing in public comment. And the organizer said, even if you don't live in Maryland, the public comment has an impact, and it doesn't take very long to do. So we have a link for you to do that as well. And there will continue to be actions to take here and there just to bring attention to these detention centers and then to put sand in the gears of the way they're operating and to support the people inside. Okay. Finally, as always, we have lots of suggestions for things you can do and actions you can take. We've already mentioned some. We have a website and also a protest calendar, should you want more. But there's a few things I wanted to highlight that are happening just around the July 4th holiday. And, a lot of organizations, including mine, we thought, oh, maybe we shouldn't do something July 4th because, people will be going to the beach and they don't want to be annoyed and it'll be hard to get enough people. Well, people want to do this. People want to show that protesting is patriotic, that rallying for democracy is patriotic, and that what else should we be doing on July 4th other than that? So you can see this list on the right of at least some of the locations where there are events going on July 4th, and urge you to check some of those out. I just had pictures for a few of them here. And then there's one on July 2nd this is part of a weekly rally at the federal courthouse every Thursday. But on July 2nd, which is also a Thursday, the focus is going to be on the stars and the stripes and human rights. And there'll be live music. And I think an important way, again, to kind of take back the flag and own it for ourselves and for our values. And I think, yeah, I can't help it. the Strait of Hormuz was like too, good. And also because even though everything surrounding this reflecting pool debacle has been funny, it also is a very serious metaphor for kind of this pattern of the Trump administration of spending millions and billions of tax dollars to supposedly fix something, but instead to make it worse. And that goes from the pool all the way to the war in Iran, to immigration, and anything else you can look at. And this image has resonated with people in a way that I think the arguments about the war in Iran have not, unfortunately. So we got to grab these things when we can, and this story is staying alive. um, so that's really all I have. Any questions, comments? I'm just looking to see. Yeah, in the situation Becky was talking about, was was that a federal court that those people were sentenced in? Peter, do you know more about this? I think you do. Oh, you already wrote it in. Thank you. It was a federal judge that sentenced those people. And here for the Sunday vigils is parking only on the street. Yes. Unless someone who's been to the more recent one on June 14th knows anything different. But yeah, I think the large parking lots are offline, but there is plenty of street parking. In some cases, you might have to walk a distance from your car to where the vigil is actually being held. Dina says California needs a statewide proposition prohibiting private detainment centers on the 2028 ballot. Very much agreed, Dina. Thank you for that, and I hope hope somebody can put one of those together. And thank you, Elizabeth, for posting the link for people to donate for the Otay Mesa Detention Center. I will include that also. And again, that money goes to the detainees who are to make phone calls and to buy stuff in the commissary.
His hands up.
Yeah, I know. Okay, Larry's letting me know there are hands up. I will get to the hands up in a second. Do we have a way to know the detainees actually get this money? There are detainees in contact with the organizers for these vigils. And in fact, what the great thing that's happened is that once the first wave of detainees had money put on their accounts, they then started using their phone calls and text calls to let the organizers know the account numbers and names of their fellow detainees. So a lot of the way that this has grown to be hundreds of detainees who have now have money on their accounts was kind of this slow, steady process. So yeah, we do know, and good question that that CoreCivic doesn't somehow interfere with that process.
Okay, good.
Is there no hope that calls to our sheriff will have an impact on her permitting use of the sheriff's range? Yeah, good question, Christopher. There was an attempt in Escondido to stop a very similar situation from happening, and the sheriff was obstinately saying, well, no, it's a good thing to do, and basically rejected the idea. So it doesn't hurt to keep the pressure up on her, but it hasn't been positive so far, which unfortunately is not a surprise. She's been very disappointing. Okay, will these links in the chat? Yes, all of these links will be in the email I send to you a little bit later tonight. So don't worry about trying to capture them. Thank you, Larry, for answering that. Brian, the drag queens are going to be at Otay Mesa.
No, they're going to be July 2nd. Drag
Oh,
Queen
good. Okay.
Lips are going to be there July 2nd. Also, I'm friendly with one of Tara Lawson Reamer staffers, and he said that the county soups are working on updating the policy around ICE use of a target range here in the county. I mean, it's a real pain for the county soups because they're progressive and the sheriff is awful, like you said, but it is in process. But also, like you said, it doesn't hurt for people to contact their county soups to let them know that they're interested in this.
Yeah. Thank you. Strait of Hormuz. Okay. All righty, let's get to some of the hands that were raised. And sorry, Cindy.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. I just want to give another shout out for the not only the Otay Sunday gathering, but also the courthouse. The numbers there are dwindling. Um, every week there's a new group who there's a calendar, takes responsibility so that the program is varied and inspirational. And it's I just say it's like my church. I go there every Thursday. It's pretty easy to get down there. You might have to pay $4 for parking, but you'll find street parking. There's also, of course, buses and trolleys. It's an hour out of your day, maybe an hour and a half. And if there's any way you can put it on your schedule to attend regularly, I don't think you'll be disappointed. And we really could use more numbers. It's just another time besides the OTI where we can gather. We get a lot of honking and show that we're not forgetting. So just a shout out for that again.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. And most of you know that that courthouse is where people are going for their immigration appointments, and frequently, getting snatched while they're doing what they were supposed to do. Although there is some good movement trying to make that illegal. Becky.
Two things. Um, One on the courthouse thing. What time is that again?
10:30 to noon
Okay.
every
Because I have a
Thursday.
friend that's an invalid, and she's always feeling bad that she can't go out to marches, and so I told her we're going to take a ride. I told her I wanted to take her for a ride on Thursday, so I thought that would be the place to take her for a ride, and then that way she can get in on the honking and so forth. I think that'd be a great lifter for her. Anyway, the next thing I wanted to say was um, I've been getting emails and texts about that the next thing that what's his name wants to do something about is he wants to get rid of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's something else that we can. In fact, my
Yeah.
4th of July 250 T-shirt has the Statue of Liberty on it. So that's something else we can really rar about. So that's my question. That's my statement. Anyway, and I'll let you go.
Yeah, I had heard that also. Thank you. Thank you, though. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I just want to say that, through the ether of Zoom and everything else, I do feel like we are a community, and it's just been so it means so much to see people showing up every month for this and contributing and sharing the information with other people. Um, it really has meaning and impact. And I think the other thing is we need to have this for ourselves also. And so thank you all for being here and doing everything you do. And we will see you. The next meeting is July 25th. We will have a guest speaker. And as soon as I absolutely can confirm who it is, I will let you know and hope to see you then. Until then, have a great 4th and take good care of yourself. Bye-bye.